11 Notorious Serial Killers and Their Chilling Crimes. Have you ever wondered about the most infamous serial killers in history and the terrifying crimes they committed? From chilling confessions to unsolved mysteries, serial killers have captured public attention for decades. These individuals have instilled fear and fascination alike. But who were they, and what drove them to commit such horrifying acts? Watch the full video to learn about these notorious figures and their gruesome histories. But before diving in, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories like this. Let's uncover the darkest chapters in criminal history together. Number 11. Ted Bundy, the Charismatic Monster. Ted Bundy is one of America's most infamous serial killers, known for his charm and intelligence, which masked his brutal crimes. Active in the 1970s, he confessed to 30 murders, though the true number is likely higher. His victims were young women, whom he abducted, assaulted, and murdered, often with bludgeoning and strangulation. Bundy's ability to manipulate and appear well-spoken helped him lure women into his trap. After evading authorities for years, he was arrested, tried, and executed in 1989. His case left a lasting impact, showing how a serial killer could hide in plain sight, shocking the world with his calculated behavior. The trial itself was a spectacle, with Bundy representing himself in court, showcasing his arrogance and unsettling charisma. Even decades later, Bundy's name remains synonymous with evil, as his crimes continue to haunt the public consciousness. His story serves as a chilling reminder of how appearances can be deceiving and how predators can exploit trust to devastating effect. Number 10. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. Known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, Jeffrey Dahmer's name is synonymous with horror. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer was responsible for the brutal murders of 17 young men. His crimes went far beyond simple murder. Dahmer's victims were often dismembered, sexually assaulted, and some were even cannibalized. Dahmer's terrifying actions were compounded by his ability to lure victims into his home, where he carried out his gruesome acts. Dahmer's case is particularly chilling because of the prolonged period in which he was able to commit his crimes without detection. His normal demeanor and apparent lack of suspicion from neighbors allowed him to continue without being caught for years. His eventual capture in 1991 shocked the world, and Dahmer was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was killed by a fellow inmate in 1994, but his legacy of terror lives on in the chilling details of his crimes. The public's enduring fascination with Dahmer highlights both the horror of his actions and the psychological depths of such incomprehensible violence. Number 9. John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, was one of America's most disturbing serial killers. Between 1972 and 1978, he lured young men and boys to his home with promises of work, only to sexually assault, torture, and murder them, burying their bodies under his house. He confessed to 33 murders, but many believe the true number may be higher. Gacy's ability to maintain a normal life as a businessman and family man while committing such horrors shocked everyone who knew him. After his arrest, he was sentenced to death and executed in 1994. His legacy as a chilling figure in criminal history endures, haunting the public's memory. Number 8. Aileen Wuornos, the Highway Killer. Aileen Wuornos is one of the few female serial killers to gain widespread notoriety. Between 1989 and 1990, she murdered 7 men, all shot at point-blank range, claiming they had attempted to sexually assault her while she worked as a prostitute. Her crimes shocked the public due to their defiance of societal norms and her view of vengeance against those she saw as exploiters. Wuornos was arrested in 1991, convicted of 6 murders, and her life story was dramatized in the 2003 film Monster, with Charlize Theron portraying her. In 2002, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Her case continues to raise difficult questions about victimization, trauma, and violent crime. Number 7. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. Active in California between 1984 and 1985, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, instilled fear across Southern California with a series of brutal murders, sexual assaults, and burglaries. Ramirez targeted both men and women, often breaking into their homes at night to assault and kill them in horrific ways. His crime spree was marked by a sadistic approach, leaving behind pentagrams and satanic symbols, leading some to believe his actions were part of a ritualistic religious motive. His reign of terror ended in 1985 after a statewide manhunt, and he was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. Sentenced to death, Ramirez died in 2013 from cancer-related complications. His chilling crimes and the fear he caused cemented his place as one of America's most notorious serial killers. Number 6. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, was convicted of 49 murders in Washington state, though he later confessed to killing 71 women. His victims were often women involved in prostitution or struggling with drug addiction. Ridgway evaded capture for nearly 2 decades due to his methodical approach, strangling his victims and disposing of their bodies in remote areas near the Green River. He was apprehended in 2001, thanks to advances in DNA technology. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Ridgway provided details that led to the discovery of additional victims. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, serving as a tragic reminder of the vulnerability of certain groups and the persistence of law enforcement in solving cold cases. To this day, the Green River Killer remains one of the most prolific serial murderers in U.S. history, leaving behind a legacy of grief and unanswered questions for the families of his victims. Number 5. Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, was responsible for at least 10 murders in Kansas between 1974 and 1991. His chilling modus operandi involved binding, torturing, and killing his victims, then sending taunting letters to the media and police, giving him the BTK moniker. Despite his grisly crimes, Rader led an outwardly normal life, working as a compliance officer and living in a suburban home with his wife and children. Rader evaded capture for decades until 2005, when advances in DNA technology helped authorities finally catch him. He was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences, and his case remains a horrifying example of how even the most ordinary people can harbor dark secrets. Number 4. Jack Unterweger, the charming journalist killer. Jack Unterweger, an Austrian serial killer, was both a journalist and a convicted murderer. He was initially imprisoned for a prior murder but was released after serving 15 years. After his release, he went on to murder at least 9 women, luring them with his charm and the facade of being a successful writer and journalist. Unterweger's case is particularly disturbing because he used his public persona to mask his criminal activities, and he even wrote about his murders in the press. He was arrested in 1994 and died in prison later that year under mysterious circumstances. Number 3. Pedro Alonso Lopez, the Monster of the Andes. Pedro Alonso Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, is one of the most prolific serial killers in history. He is believed to have murdered over 100 girls in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru during the 1970s and 1980s. Lopez's crimes were especially horrific because he targeted young girls, often abducting them and then strangling them with their own clothes. Lopez was arrested in 1980 and was sentenced to 16 years in prison. However, after serving just a few years, he was released due to a loophole in the law, and his whereabouts remain unknown. Number 2. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, the Brazilian Dexter. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, known as the Brazilian Dexter, is notorious for killing at least 71 people, although he claims to have killed over 100. Many of his victims were fellow inmates in the Brazilian prison system, and Filho's violent crimes were driven by a thirst for revenge. He even murdered his own father. Filho was arrested in 1973 and released in 2007. Though his violent actions continue to haunt Brazil, his case is a chilling reminder of how deeply trauma and vengeance can shape a killer's path. His twisted sense of morality, targeting those he deemed bad people, earned him the comparison to the fictional character Dexter Morgan. Despite his release, Filho's notoriety endures, sparking debates about rehabilitation, justice, and the psychological impact of his crimes on society. His story remains one of the most controversial in criminal history. Number 1. Henry Lee Lucas, the Confessed Killer. Henry Lee Lucas was a convicted serial killer who gained national attention in the 1980s after confessing to hundreds of murders. While many of his confessions were later proven to be false, Lucas's case remains controversial because of the possibility that some of his admissions were true. His confessions were often seen as attempts to gain notoriety, and the number of victims he claimed to have killed ranged in the hundreds. Lucas was convicted of several murders and was executed in 2001. Despite his false confessions, his case serves as a reminder of how psychological manipulation and the thirst for attention can complicate investigations and justice. What do you think? If you found these stories as heart-wrenching as we did, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts on these chilling cases. Your voice matters. Together, we can keep seeking justice, one story at a time.